With that, I wanted to bring in our buddy Dr. A, Inside Injuries. Dr. A, what's going on, man?
Good, guys. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing well. We called Virginia because we talked to her more often, but she didn't answer us, and then we called you. You were our backup.
No, what, you guys going to throw me out now? It's all Virginia. It's about Virginia.
meet Virginia. It's a song by Train. You know, Train.
She's a lot better looking than me, so,
I wouldn't say that, Dr. A. You're beautiful.
Beautiful.
All right, so we were just talking.
It's like a singing edition of
Very
BFF.
very nice.
James Blunt.
We were just talking about Dallas Keuchel here, Doc, and the BFFs chose to draft Dallas Keuchel over Masahiro Tanaka, despite Florio being like, you're making a mistake. Tanaka's been out for a little while here, and it seems like he's making good progress, and you're hearing rumors he could be back as soon as next week. Is that true, and is that smart by the Yankees?
He's had grade 1 hamstring strains. The unique thing is that he's had symmetric bilateral grade 1 hamstring injuries. It's not just on one leg, it's on both legs. And so, they both have to heal and they both have to be rehabbed. And, starting pitchers, they, very, very sensitive from a rehab standpoint. People, the teams take them very, very carefully. So we're looking at a July 6th healthy to return after everything is said and done. So that does kind of fall into the end of next week. If he kind of comes back earlier than that, I would say, there's a much larger risk of getting in a re-injured hamstring, or he may not be performing up to par because of that potential sensitivity. So July 6th right now, but it's the most mildest of hamstring injuries. So it just needs a couple more until July 6th, and then he should be good to go.
All right, so that's relatively soon. I hope the Yankees do ultimately hold him out until that July 6th date and make him ready to rock. But what about his battery mate, Gary Sanchez, who hurt himself last weekend? It looked like you saw him pull up at first base. He hurt his groin. You've heard anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks with Gary Sanchez. What's the deal with him?
Yeah, so, Gary Sanchez, although he's a very, very good player, he's a very injury-prone type player. And, we've had him at high injury risk before the season started, and he's remained there pretty much all year. He had a groin strain last year. He only missed 3 days last year, but this one's a little bit more severe. This one's a grade 2 groin, and it's, the optimal recovery time right now is 4 weeks, and, his healthy to return date right now is July the 22nd. So it's not like a 2-3 month stint, but you still have to wait a good month before he can recover. It's not a groin tear, which is good. It's a grade 2, so there's inflammation, but it's not a tear, which is very lucky for him, especially the fact that he had a previous groin injury. So right now it's July the 22nd. He should be back on the field. However, he will still be at high injury risk on our books, and don't be surprised if a few weeks down the road there'll be another injury or possibly another groin injury.
Brutal. That's not what you're hoping for Gary Sanchez.
Yeah, July 22nd is pretty much right after the All-Star break, so
A little bit after, yeah.
that's not terrible. He gets, all players get that time to rest. Anyway, I do want to say I'm not surprised that you asked both the Yankee questions, Greg. But moving on to Chris Bryant. I want to bring up Chris Bryant to you, Dr. A. He was questionable earlier on in the week, and then he ended up getting placed on a DL after lineup lock. If some people managed to keep him in the lineup, we noticed so far in the year he only has 9 home runs, and we've heard about shoulder injuries sapping people of their power. Is there a chance that this shoulder injury has affected his production so far this year, and how much time do we actually expect him to miss?
Yeah, so, he was not at peak health and low injury risk in the beginning of the season. We had him at elevated injury risk and above average. And not bad, but he's not at low and peak, kind of what everybody wants him to have. This is a minor grade 1, actually not even a grade 1, a very minor tweak type of soft tissue shoulder inflammation. Probably tweaked his rotator cuff a little bit, but it's nothing to be worried about with this specific injury. 1 week recovery time, June 30th is what we're looking at. And, but will remain at elevated injury risk, and this has dropped him now to below average. So it's a great point that you guys made, is the fact that, he will come back to recover from this particular injury, but the impact of this type of injury on offensive production is pretty impactful. And so that's why he's given an HPF of below average. So he's a guy that, yeah, he'll be on the field, but I don't know how many fantasy points that he's going to be generating for the rest of the year. So, I mean, fantasy players should really, really take a look at that because even though he is back on the field, this type of injury will really limit offensive production.
A player that we discussed a lot yesterday was Shohei Ohtani, and we really wanted to ask you this question. Is there any way that if he does return this year to pitch, or even if it's just in a hitting role like the Angels have discussed, is there a possibility that he could re-injure himself or further injure himself and put 2020 in jeopardy, even if he was to undergo Tommy John at the end of the year? Or is it the damage is done, let him hit this year, and then come next year we don't see him at all, but he's fine in 2020?
Yeah, Ohtani is the most unique baseball player on the planet, especially even for us to analyze him, because it's almost like Ohtani 1 and Ohtani 2, right? You have a starting pitcher and then you have a DH, right? It's almost like you have to think of them as two separate athletes, but you can't. And so when it comes to his pitching, having a partial ulnar collateral ligament tear, shut down. I mean, there's no reason why he should pitch for the rest of the year. I mean, this is very, very serious, especially with the history that he has. So from a pitching standpoint, I would be really surprised if he came back this year at all. I mean, this thing is a 1-year type of recovery. What's surprising to me is that they're talking about him DHing in that role, and there is a chance of worsening or re-injuring or inhibiting the healing of that ulnar collateral ligament in the hitting motion. And so it's not as severe as the throwing motion, but in the hitting motion, it is. It does have something to do, and it will put a little pressure on the ulnar collateral ligament. If I was, if I was the Angels and I was advising them, I would say this is, you completely shut him down hitting and pitching to give him the best possibility to come back full strength in both capacities again. Otherwise, one injury and one type of position is going to feed off the other. If he does hit, he potentially could come back, what we're saying on July the 26th, but we would not, if we were advising the Angels, we would not recommend that he comes back anytime soon to hit as well.
See? There you go.
I'll take Dr. A's word over yours.
It's the same word.
You're not a doctor.
But I trust Dr. A a lot more than you.
Yeah, not
We
Dr.
said
Ray.
the same thing.
Yeah, but he has proof. You were just speculating.
But my speculation was founded.
Sure. Via Dr. A confirming it.
Yeah, technically, you're not wrong, but he just proved what you speculated on. So we believe Dr. A. We still don't believe you.
Doc, do you have a few minutes to prove me right after the break?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome. I appreciate that. We have a couple more players we want to ask Doc about and a whole lot more headlines to get over, including Zach Eflin, my man, start. Sandy Alcantara called up. I want to talk about him. And Yu Darvish re-injured himself. Stick around. More on the way after this.
On FNTSY Radio and on your popular podcast providers.
Greg Sussman, Michael Florio, Frank Stanfill here, your fantasy best friends forever. Hanging out with Dr. Ray on a Thursday. Doc, I normally ask you about my players, so I'm going to continue to do that. AJ Pollock, finally making some progress. Thumb injuries kept him out a long, long time. Is there light at the end of the tunnel for AJ Pollock?
Yes, I mean, fractures and avulsion fractures for this particular injury, this should heal completely. This shouldn't be an issue for him moving forward. However, that doesn't rule him out for any other injury in the human body, And so, he's an elevated injury risk. Previous to this, he was at high injury risk. Previous to the season started, he was at high injury risk. So as you can see, Greg, we're not very high on the injury risk category for AJ Pollock. So to answer your question, yes, this injury will heal and he'll be fine after that. But there's still other injuries in the human body that he could get. And unfortunately, the risk is almost 50%.
All right. The risk is almost 50%. So basically what Doc is saying, as soon as Pollock comes back, trade him away.
Yep.
Once he has that big game, try and get rid of him.
He's amazing, so he will.
There you go. All right, Greg, you asked about one player that you own. I'll ask about a player we all own.
All right.
And that is Lorenzo Cain. Kind of similar to Chris Bryant. You didn't know if he was going to play coming into the week, and then once the week started, it ends up that he gets placed on a DL. Obviously a different injury, though. He's dealing with a groin strain. Now, to me, that worries me a little bit more because Lorenzo Cain, a guy who depends on his speed, we depend on him in fantasy for stolen bases, scoring runs. So what's the prognosis on Lorenzo Cain? And, I mean, is this something that's going to affect him even once he returns as well?
So this is a guy that even through all of the injuries that he had last year, he played 103 games last year, but he had in 2017 a quad injury, 2018 a quad injury, 2015, 2016, 2017, and this year hamstring injuries, and he had a knee injury in 15. Okay, but he shows that he can play through these injuries. But the problem is that just being on the field is not good enough. You obviously have to perform. This groin injury is kind of one of those things that kind of throws chaos into the pot, where it's a grade 1 groin, 2 weeks to recovery. But with all of the other injuries that he's had, this is sort of going to be the beginning, unfortunately, of multiple injuries. And I don't know if he's going to be able to play 103 games here in 2018. And his production and stolen bases, etc., likely will go down. I mean, he's at a high injury risk right now, and he was high injury risk before, but it's because of his history that our algorithm is saying that. So he has 2 weeks to recover. July 7th, he should be back, and but after that, he'll still be at high injury risk. But this is like a risk reward kind of player, so if you don't want to let him go, you definitely need to have somebody on your roster that can at least somewhat, be put into that spot if he does get back on the disabled list.
Yu Darvish's return has been pushed back. Oh, sorry. I'll ask.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, it's been pushed back, and obviously we're going to ask about Yu Darvish because we thought he was coming back this weekend, Doc. I know he wasn't on the list. Do you have anything on Yu Darvish?
I don't have anything immediately right now on Yu Darvish, but if you guys tell me, I can give you stuff to talk about.
Yeah, listen, this is the thing that it honestly just broke as we got on the air. It was tweeted out by the Cubs beat reporters that Tyler Chatwood's going to start this weekend instead of Yu Darvish. Clearly, his bullpen session hasn't gone well, Florio.
Yeah, and he said after his tendonitis or whatever the issue is, he said, that's common for pitchers trying to come back, but I don't think it is.
Clearly not.
I'll ask you about a different pitcher.
There you go.
One that I know Nando Defino would very much so want us to ask.
That's why he's on the list.
Julio Urias is working his way back, and he threw a first bullpen last week, but he only hit 88 miles per hour, and this is a guy who sits in the mid-90s. Is that common, and should we expect to see a velocity uptick as he works his way back? And more importantly, do you think we'll see him pitch in the second half?
So he's had 12 to 14 months of recovery. I mean, anterior capsule surgery on a starting pitcher with the throwing extremity, that is a massive surgery in terms of, making sure that it does not, re-injure once you start to pitch again. And so that's hence the really lengthy recovery time. I think he's in the upper 80s because he's just taking it slow. I mean, he does not want to throw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball and feel pain, so he wants to slowly develop it. So I'm not concerned that he's in the upper 80s and not hit 90s yet. It's likely his choice and not, or the team's choice and not really. I think he's capable of doing it, but it's like one of those things. They're taking it very touch and go because any pain that he feels, it's like that Andrew Luck syndrome, right? It's the same exact thing. Any pain that he feels, it's because of a re-injury, and then that really, it's basically the season's over. So what you need to do is to be patient, and at some point at the end of this month to the middle of July, or maybe even after the All-Star break, you should start to see him back in the starting rotation as long as he doesn't have any further setbacks, and he's hitting the 90-mile-an-hour fastball without any pain.
There you go. Hopefully he'll get there sooner rather than later. He doesn't have any problems in his rehab. That's Julio Urias. Hopefully we see him later on this year. Dr. A, I know we look forward to seeing you next week. We appreciate the time, sir. We'll do it again then.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Awesome.
Have a good day.
There you go. Dr. A from Inside Injuries. Download the app. Check out their Twitter. Dr. A is the best in the business.